Field savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
An oversized load causing some trouble in traffic 4100 south, about 4800 west, and cleanup continues on the crash in West Valley. Bangerter Highway 4100 south, left lanes both north and southbound are blocked to traffic. UDOT traffic alert. Plan ahead for delays on Legacy Parkway 7 days a week through early August. The highway is down to one lane in each direction from I-215 to 500 south for paving. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather warming up through the weekend with a high of 100 on Sunday. Cools off a bit next week. There's a chance of a thunderstorm today, but no precipitation in the forecast after that. 89 degrees, partly cloudy right now at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 in the morning, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
When it comes to Russia, the headlines have been all about the Wagner chief, Prigozhin. He's back in Russia, or at least he's purportedly back in Russia, clearly with a big target on his back. But beneath the headlines and what's going on and who's supplying what weapons to whom, today's an important day. Beyond the headlines, because it does mark the 100 days since Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich was arrested and lawfully detained for espionage in Russia. So the question beyond the headlines is what's being done to bring him home? What does his detainment tell us about Vladimir Putin and his regime and the future of the war against Ukraine? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
There's so many components to what's going on inside of Russia right now that we want to break it down into a couple of things. So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about some of the interworkings of what is happening, what's happening at the border, what's happening with troops, what's happening with the Wagner Group. We want to begin with a really important issue, and that's what's happening with Evan Gershkovich from the Wall Street Journal. Of course, he was arrested on espionage charges, being unlawfully detained clearly inside of Russia for his reporting. And so we want to get to that story because it is one that has been a little under the radar over the last 100 days as he has waited and waited. During a White House press briefing today, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan was asked specifically about the Wall Street Journal reporter and what was being done now that we are 100 days into his detention.
Today is the 100th day of Evan's unjust and unlawful detention. And for those 100 days, President Biden, the entire national security team, our embassy in Moscow, our Secretary of State, myself personally have been invested in trying to bring him home safely.
Jake Sullivan also confirmed that they are in talks with the Kremlin to bring Evan home. He gave an update on how those talks are going.
We are prepared to do hard things in order to get our citizens home, including getting Evan home. I do not want to give false hope. What the Kremlin said earlier this week is correct. There have been discussions, but those discussions have not produced a clear pathway to a resolution. And so I cannot stand here today and tell you that we have a clear answer to how we are going to get Evan home. All I can do is tell you that we have a clear commitment and conviction that we will do everything possible to bring him home.
So a very measured Jake Sullivan did acknowledge the reports that have been coming out that Russian authorities at very high levels have been in contact with the United States about some sort of swap or some sort of way to bring Evan home. Jake Sullivan again saying, we haven't figured out the path. We don't know what the process is going to look like. We don't want to create false hope. I think that's very important. I thought it was also important that Jake Sullivan extended that beyond just Evan to other Americans who are being unlawfully detained inside of Russia as well. We have to remember there's always the headlines, and then there's always the things, and more importantly, the people that are underneath those headlines that are really worth our consideration and our attention. So finally, Jake Sullivan was also asked about the Wagner Group, the rebellion, how that's going to impact Vladimir Putin's willingness to make a deal for the release of Evan. Here's Jake Sullivan's response.
With respect to the question of whether the recent actions by Prigozhin and the fallout from that creates new openings or opportunities, I can't say that I have perceived that directly, but of course, this is a story that continues to be written day by day, so we will have to see how things continue to play out in Moscow. In the meantime, we're going to stay laser focused on doing everything we can, both directly with the Russians and then with other allies and partners around the world who are invested in his safe return to try to get him out as soon as possible.
Again, a little bit of hedging there from Jake Sullivan, trying to deflect a little bit in terms of not tipping the United States' hand at all as it relates to how this is being negotiated for the release of the Wall Street Journal reporter. And I do think it's interesting. You could get a little bit of a sense there that what happened with the Wagner Group, that uprising, has clearly shaken Vladimir Putin. And the question is, how will it change his willingness to make a deal or to get something done to bring Evan home? That's going to be one, as Jake Sullivan said, that we're going to continue to watch play out day by day. Now, I want to go back almost 100 days. Shortly after Evan was first detained and arrested inside of Russia, I actually spoke with Andrew Nagorsky. You may remember that name. Andrew Nagorsky, of course, was expelled from Russia in 1982 when the Soviet government became very angry with his reporting. So he understands what it's like to be a reporter inside of Russia, how that works, how you navigate it, who's watching you, and when, which is all the time. And we talked about that. And then we also dug a little bit deeper with Andrew Nagorsky when we had him on the show. And he said that the arrest of Evan just shows how vulnerable Vladimir Putin's regime actually is. Listen to this.
It shows that this regime, for all its bluster and everything, is very insecure, and it knows that for all the lies they're putting out as justification for their invasion of Ukraine, that this has been a disaster, and what they're doing there is a disaster for Ukraine, first of all, but for Russia itself. And therefore, the more there is actual reporting on the real state of play, the worse off they are, the more exposed they are to the obvious lies that they're putting out.
So again, that was Andrew Nagorsky, again, someone who understands what it's like to be targeted by the Russian government for reporting, for being able to engage what we take for advantage here in freedom of the press and freedom of speech. And so that was nearly 100 days ago. So we had Andrew Nagorsky on just shortly after Evan was first unlawfully arrested in Russia for espionage charges by the Kremlin. And I just think it was so interesting. Here we are 100 days down the road. And what Andrew Nagorsky told us on this show is that Vladimir Putin is very vulnerable. There was no sense at that point in the program that the Wagner Group would rise up in any way, shape, or form. And so I think what Andrew Nagorsky told us on this show almost 100 days ago has proved to be very prophetic. And so as we look at how that continues to play out, I also want to go back to a conversation that the former United States ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman, had him on the Sunday edition last week. And he also spoke with CNN last week, talking about why he believes that what we're seeing now is the beginning of the end for Vladimir Putin.
Putin's uncontested leadership is over. So I don't say that hyperbolically. I say for 23 years, Putin has been uncontested in terms of his ability to call the shots as the final arbiter of all decisions in Russia. So what else has happened through this whole Yevgeny Prigozhin episode? Putin has been humiliated. That's not happened many times in his career. We're not going to know in the days and weeks and even the months ahead what the likely outcome for Vladimir Putin will be. He still controls the state. He controls the security apparatus. He's got more bombs and guns than anybody else. But I'm here to tell you, I think we're witnessing the final saga of Vladimir Putin.
Fascinating insight from former United States Ambassador to Russia, John Huntsman. And as we look at connecting all of those dots, I think the weakness that has been exposed in Vladimir Putin, I think that is going to lead to a different kind of negotiation when it comes to getting Evan Gershkovich out of Russia and remember, there are other American citizens that are being unlawfully detained, and they need to be part of that conversation and that equation as well. And so the thing that we're going to be watching is, what does the administration do? Does the administration function from a position of strength and lean into this moment to get these Americans home? Or is it status quo, very methodical, and very slow? We've seen one of the challenges of the Biden administration has been rapid response, or being able to take in information, digest it, come up with a plan and a strategy, execute it, and keep turning that over. And that's going to be the test. And that will be the test not only in getting people like Evan home, and other Americans home, but also in terms of how we best support Ukraine as well. So we're going to stay with this conversation as it relates to Russia and now Ukraine. We'll take a look at how Russian troops are amassing in the Donbass region and why the U.S. is sending cluster bombs to Ukraine. Much more to come on Inside Sources. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. The first half of 2023 was nonstop.
The rain and snow keeps falling.
Crews are working on Immigration Creek.
Lori Vallow Daybell
Guilty on all 6 charges.
Congressman Chris Stewart to step down.
Join us for what comes next. Get breaking news from Tim and Amanda mornings 5 to 9. Go deeper with David Dujanovic at 9 and Boyd Matheson at 1. And drive home with Jeff Kaplan from 3 to 7. The news won't slow, and neither will we at KSL News Radio.
Okay, it's hot outside and you need to cool. The new Air Compact appliances are up to 50% off retail. Yeah, life is about to get much cooler. At Warehouse B in Linden or at warehouseb.com, you're about to find out how much cooler. Either a new Air or Frigidaire room-size evaporative cooling fan starting at $49. Yeah, that's cool. Or the new 126-can glass door beverage fridge starting at $149. Even cooler. Or a 48-quart electric camping cooler with dual zone starting at $249. That's seriously cool. With Warehouse B, everything is factory refurbished right here in Utah and comes with a 1-year warranty. Want more savings? Warehouse B is loaded with scratch and dent models that offer the kind of value your family needs today. Visit warehouseb.com and grab a countertop nugget pebble ice maker starting at $199. Shop warehouseb.com or visit their outlet store in Linden off I-15 at exit 273. Warehouse B.
And we're live here outside the Perez family home, just waiting for the... And there they go, almost on time this morning. Mom is coming out the front door strong with a double-arm kid carry. Looks like Dad has the bags. Daughter is bringing up the rear. Oh, but the diaper bag wasn't closed. Diapers and toys are everywhere. Ooh, but Mom has just nailed the perfect car seat buckle for the toddler. And now the eldest daughter, who looks to be about 9 or 10, has secured herself in the booster seat. Dad zips the bag closed, and they're off. But looks like Mom doesn't realize her coffee cup is still on the roof of the car. And there it goes. Oh, that's a shame. That mug was a fam favorite.
Don't sweat the small stuff. Just nail the big stuff. Like making sure your kids are buckled correctly in the right seat for their age and size. Learn more at nhtsa.gov/the right seat.
Visit nhtsa.gov/the
right seat.
Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
I guess it's human nature, Amanda, that no matter how much money we have in our savings account, it never seems like it's enough. And if you find yourself in that mode right now, let us direct you over to our friends at UCCU. They are wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
Getting help with plumbing repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, a 2-year-old drowned in a canal in Spanish Fork this morning. Police say he apparently wandered away from a football field where his dad was coaching. Second, Salt Lake City police were able to capture a suspect in a hit-and-run homicide at a campsite near Grantsville. Third, more cases of malaria have turned up in Florida. That worries health officials because it appears it was spread locally. Right now, 89 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Get deeper insights on the news from Inside Sources.
To stay with the question, when it comes to Russia, thousands of Russian troops are reported to be amassing on the border of the Donbass region in Ukraine. The question is, why are they there? We also want to look at some of the things in terms of how Ukraine is being armed with the addition of cluster bombs as one component to additional U.S. and international support. Will that be formidable? Will that be helpful? What will it mean in terms of the execution of Ukraine's counteroffensive, and what does Russia do from there? Really pleased to have back on the program with us once again Mark Toth. He's an economist, entrepreneur, and former board member of the World Trade Center St. Louis. And Mark, welcome back to the show. And you and your partner Jonathan Sweet had another great piece in The Hill entitled "The Russians Are Coming." Why Putin might be amassing 180,000 troops near the Donbass. So give us a little lay of the land. What are we seeing, and more importantly, what are we sensing in all of this?
Sure. Boyd, first, thanks for having me back. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. I think what we're seeing is a lot of head faking going on right now. And if you can kind of picture yourself, or have your listeners picture themselves, kind of back to where Eisenhower and Rommel were at the early days of D-Day. Not quite sure where the counteroffensive was going to strike there. Was it going to be further up in Calais, or was it going to be in Normandy? Didn't know. And so we're seeing a lot of activity, in the past few days. That was over the ZNPP, the nuclear power plant that Russia controls further south. Will they blow it? Will they not blow it? Is that a head fake to make Ukraine think about launching a counteroffensive en masse there? I think we're seeing the same thing with these 180,000 troops being amassed in the Donbass itself. Could be a couple of reasons why. One, just as a head fake, Putin wants to keep Ukraine away from Crimea at all costs. That's a game changer for him, potentially a regime costing loss if he loses it. He also may prefer to fight on that terrain because, as we said in the piece John and I had written, that it would shorten his own supply lines. And that was a critical failure early on last year when his supply lines got stretched. He couldn't keep up. So Rostov-on-Don, the site made famous by Prigozhin's uprising last week, is the key supply logistical depot, if you will, for the war effort in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And they'd be much closer to that if they fight the battle there.
Yeah, supply lines are always a fascinating part to watch in any kind of waging of war, and clearly Vladimir Putin failed in that component early on, rolling into Ukraine. I want you to dig in just a little bit because you had some really fascinating components in your piece in The Hill. talking about Crimea and why this is so important, and not just as a military win and a hold, but you dug into some other spaces that I think are really interesting in terms of what might be going on inside Vladimir Putin's head and what that strategy might be really driving toward.
Yeah, really to understand Crimea and how it factors into Putin's thinking goes back to the earliest days of his regime. He created a false historical narrative about Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus was a loosely prototype state that existed mostly in Ukraine as we know it today, upwards into Poland, bits of Belarus, and slightly into what is modern-day Russia, but it didn't reach up into Russia itself. So you've got three different countries that kind of claim it as their ancestral heritage, their history, but it's not quite true. It's a contrived notion on Putin's part. Also, to kind of cover the immorality of his regime, he partnered with Patriarch Kirill, who's the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, and they believe, the Russians do, that Christianity or Orthodox Christianity first came to the Russian Empire via Crimea. That man by the name of Voldemar, which is Vladimir, by the way, in Russian, was baptized in Crimea, and that was the start of the Russian Empire. But again, they're seeking somebody else's history to do that. So for Putin, Crimea is about restoring his kind of Peter the Great vision of what the Russian Empire used to look like, but it also has a lot of folklore and a lot of history behind it. So that's why for him, why Crimea symbolically is important. It's also terribly important from a strategic standpoint. Their base that they've had there since the late 1700s has helped them control the Black Sea. So there are other more practical reasons, but it goes to Putin's narrative that he uses inside of Russia for why Crimea is so important for the Russian psyche, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that is an area that has really gone underreported in terms of the communication strategy and the story. Everybody wants to be part of a winning story, and Vladimir Putin has been a master at controlling that narrative. And here he really is putting together a pretty toxic elixir, I think, of his own hubris, along with a little bit of history and a whole lot of mythology to create something that, hey, we are the noble ones. We're on the side of the angels on this thing. And it will be interesting to see how that plays out, and if Ukraine is able to repel them back, and that Crimea suddenly starts to become a changing of hands moment. To me, that would really be the beginning of the end of Vladimir Putin's story.
It would be, and General Hodges, who has been Hodges, the former U.S. Army Commander of Europe, has stated this repeatedly, that Crimea is the decisive terrain of the war. The war will decide it one way or the other in Crimea. If Putin loses Crimea, it's game over. And that's why it's so important for Ukraine to take it one way or the other. They don't have to militarily take it. They can also take it by cutting it off. They've got options there.
Yeah, very important. I want to go real quickly to a little bit of sound. Not long ago, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan explained to reporters why they're sending cluster bombs to Ukraine. Take a listen.
We base our security assistance decision on Ukraine's needs on the ground. And Ukraine needs artillery to sustain its offensive and defensive operations. Artillery is at the core of this conflict. Ukraine is firing thousands of rounds a day to defend against Russian efforts to advance and also to support its own efforts to retake its sovereign territory.
And Mark, give us some perspective on that. I thought it was most interesting and noteworthy that Jake Sullivan he went out and criticized Russia for using these types of cluster bombs, but then went on to explain that the bombs that the U.S. are sending are quite different from Russia. Give us a little explanation there.
Yeah, and I think there's a little bit of gamesmanship here as well. Clearly, Ukraine is running low on artillery shells. They're firing a lot a day, and it's clear that our own supply chain has to be ramped up in order to provide them what their needs are. But I also think what's happening is that on two levels, because of all this gamesmanship that's going on with Russia, whether it's the CNPP or the same thing with this 180,000 troops in the Donbass, is the U.S. is trying to ratchet it up. If Ukraine is indeed struggling in the very early stages of a counteroffensive, nothing major has happened yet. Could be that the cluster bombs and the munitions, they're a force multiplier. They're a means of taking one bomb and taking out armor on the ground, taking out personnel on the ground. And if they can do that, they may need to clear those pathways into fixed Russian defenses if they're going after the Crimea. If they're confident that Putin is going to try to launch a counteroffensive in the Donbass, the provision of these cluster bombs as a force multiplier may be to avoid another Bakhmut-type meat grinder, not from the Russian side, but from the Ukrainian side. They can't afford another slog like that now that they're trying to go on the counteroffensive. So having 180,000 green troops there, the cluster munitions would be an effective way of breaking their morale and spirit to fight that battle in that locale. So I suspect that's really behind the use of these weapons. They are controversial. 123 countries have agreed to ban them. Ukraine hasn't. The United States hasn't, nor has Russia.
Fascinating stuff and great insight. Again, great piece in The Hill. Mark Toth, we always appreciate you joining us, and we're going to keep all eyes on Crimea. The head fakes are going to happen in a multitude of different places and spaces, but as you pointed out, this is going to be Vladimir Putin and a really interesting combination of history, a little bit of mystery, and a whole lot of hubris from Vladimir Putin, and we'll see how that continues to play out. Mark, as always, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you, Boyd. Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to continue on this conversation a little later on in the 2 o'clock hour as we continue to see all the nuances underneath the headlines as it relates to Russia and Ukraine, what comes next, and ultimately that fight for freedom. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Spanish Fork police say a 2-year-old died drowned in a canal near the American Leadership Academy. The police department tells us the child apparently wandered off the football field where his father was an assistant coach. They found the child about a quarter of a mile away from the field in an irrigation canal, but they were not able to save his life. A woman who used to work at a treatment center for drug and alcohol addiction has been arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting 9 different patients. KSL News Radio's Peter Johnston has more.
Brooke Lynn Powell faces sexual assault and battery charges that 9 former patients say she did while they were recovering from addictions at the Odyssey House. According to KSL.com, Powell used a carrot or stick method with the victims to get inappropriate sexual contact and drugs. Powell allegedly told some patients that she could get them in trouble with the courts or their recovery program, and others that she would let them use her phone to access their social media accounts.
Odyssey House CEO Adam Cohen tells KSL.com that Powell hasn't worked there since February, and that her alleged behavior directly contradicts the mission of the recovery center. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. The head of the union representing 340,000 UPS workers said a strike appears imminent. Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien spoke with the hosts of ABC's GMA3 on Friday, explaining one of the main conditions for negotiations, a raise for the company's part-time workers.
We want to establish a livable starting wage for part-timers, but also make certain we reward those part-timers who worked through the pandemic. We lost members as a result of going to work when there were no vaccinations, no protections, and all the while, bottom line of their balance sheet kept growing and growing and growing.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down 59 points on the day so far. The NASDAQ, though, is up about 45. And just ahead, KSL weather. Looks like warm weather into the weekend, actually hot, up to 100 on Sunday. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Your home is the place where you know your loved ones are secure. But the things that keep your home protected can't keep pests at bay. That's where RAID comes in. For 60 years, RAID scientists have worked to protect people around the world. With trusted research, ingredients, testing standards, and product efficacy, RAID seeks to create a better future for all, especially the ones you love most. RAID, protection for all.
You can host the best backyard barbecue when you find a professional on Angie to make your backyard the best around. Connect with skilled professionals to get all your home projects done well. Inside to outside, repairs to renovations. Get started on the Angie app or visit Angie.com today. You can do this when you Angie that.
So you'd like to start enjoying your home a little more without climbing the stairs or doing yard work. How about spacious living in a newly designed, planned community with access to activities like golf, pickleball, and even leisurely strolls on beautiful open trails? It's yours with Nilsson Homes. They've been building homes across the Wasatch Front for over 45 years. Now see their latest single-level living community in Davis and Weber County. Brand new, move-in ready homes in the heart of Davis and Weber County, offering all the things you want in low-maintenance, luxury, single-level living. Easy access to just about everything. And best of all, no more stairs, lawnmowers, or yard work. Nilsson Homes has thought of everything, and it's done for you. Take advantage of amazing financing or reverse mortgage options. Nilsson Homes, luxury, low-maintenance living. Visit nilssonhomes.com. That's Nilson homes.com.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's High Yield Savings Certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
The crash is still blocking the inside lanes of traffic, both north and southbound directions. Bangerter Highway at 4100 South. And we also have a closure southbound Mountain View. Those lanes are closed near 4100 South due to an oversized load. When it comes to trusted, affordable auto care, nobody does it better than Burt Brothers Tire and Service. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather warming up through the weekend with a high of 100 on Sunday. Cools off a bit next week. There is a chance of a thunderstorm today, but no precipitation in the forecast after that. Right now, 87 degrees, partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, we've been talking today about the fight for freedom going on inside of Ukraine, the crumbling of authoritarianism inside of Russia and other places around the world. But as we talk about those important principles, we recently, of course, celebrated our Independence Day and the important principles our nation was founded on, including those first freedoms, including religious liberty. President Dallin H. Oaks, first counselor in the first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, has been an outspoken advocate for religious freedom. He offered in a historic address in Rome, Italy, for the 2022 Notre Dame Religious Liberty Summit. He also sat down recently for a podcast, Church News podcast, with Sarah Jane Weaver, editor of the Church News, to talk about the importance of religious liberty.
The most effective representation of religious liberty is a representation that stands up for people of faith or no faith, because even people of no faith have a great interest in what can be done by religions and believing people who speak up for freedom generally, which we try to encourage.
And that is from the Church News podcast, and the voice and editor of the Church News, Sarah Jane Weaver, joins us on the line from London, England today. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
You've had an opportunity to sit down with President Oaks on a number of occasions, talking about these important components of religious liberty. As you had this opportunity in your podcast, give us a sense of what do you feel and why is this such an important thing to President Oaks?
You know, President Oaks talks about religious liberty in a really, really interesting way. He says that there's two aspects of religious liberty. First, he said some people think it should dominate every other consideration. Or secondly, that there are people who think it should be dominated by other considerations. And he said in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that we're trying to carve out the middle ground.
Oh, I think that's a fascinating thing. I want to play one other clip from your podcast and from President Oaks, which I found this one both refreshing and compelling. And that was what he wants young people to know about religious freedom.
I have one thought for young adults in the audience. If you haven't thought seriously about religious freedom, or if you wonder why it's important, let me encourage you to think about where would the absence of religious freedom lead society.
I think that's such an interesting way to look at that, Sarah, to look at what would the absence of religious liberty really mean. We had Jonathan Rausch from Brookings Institution on a few weeks ago, and he talked about that very thing coming from the perspective of an atheist, that even as an atheist, he sees the importance of having that freedom of religion. Give us a sense, you've been able to travel looking at some different conversations in terms of kind of that religious liberty in our DNA, looking at the Constitution, and even some of the things that came before that. Just share a little of your perspective there.
Yeah, well, he was in Rome last year during the Notre Dame Religious Liberty Initiative. He called for a global effort to defend and advance religious freedom for all of God's children in every nation of the world. And I thought that was such an interesting call, especially taking place in Rome, where so many people of different religious faith traditions believe that ancient apostles walked in Rome and that they brought the message of Jesus Christ to the world. And it was a place that so many of them also gave their lives.
Such an important component there. And there was a speech that President Oaks gave. I think it was a seminal speech at the University of Virginia in that historic spot in the rotunda on the University of Virginia's historic campus. Give us a sense of what President Oaks called on religious leaders and organizations around the world to do.
Yeah, he asked for a peaceful resolution to the conflicts between religious freedom and non-discrimination. So now he's saying that there's a basic conflict between people who promote faith and those issues that often surround LGBTQ plus issues. And he said, let us unite with those who advocate non-discrimination to seek a culture and laws that respect the rights of all to the equal protection of the law. So he's just saying we can find a middle ground. It goes along with what you've talked about and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have promoted in a legal thing that says we want fairness for all.
And now I know you're in London. Tell us about what's going on there. What kind of gathering is this going to be? What does this look like?
Well, I'm in London this week doing some interviews on issues that include religious liberty, that include religious collaboration, that include people of faith getting together and working together. And I love being in London because it was in London that we got the Magna Carta in 1215 that actually started this idea of religious freedom, that religious freedom took root in that very historic document. Elder Quentin L. Cook and others who are senior leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have called the Magna Carta a precious precursor to the Declaration of Independence or the United States Constitution or other related documents.
Yeah, and I think that I know that Elder Quentin L. Cook of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles has also been another one who has looked deeply at all of those things, going back to the Magna Carta, looking at the Declaration, looking at the progression in terms of how do we advance those principles and how do we bring our behavior into alignment with those precious principles. I know part of the activity over there is this Notre Dame Religious Liberty Initiative. Tell us about that.
So next week, the third annual Notre Dame Religious Liberty Summit will take place in London. And this is a summit that brings together all kinds of religious leaders to talk about freedom of conscience, freedom of religion. Dean Marcus Cole, who is the dean of the Notre Dame Law School, says if we don't have a freedom of religion, then nothing else matters.
It is, and it's one of those that Neil A. Maxwell said, be careful about lopping off some of those limbs of that tree of liberty. You take one off, and you often start undermining the root of it all. And I think that's an important component to all of this. Sarah Jane Weaver is the editor of the Church News and also the Church News podcast. And this particular episode that we've been talking about, Sarah, with President Dallin H. Oaks, it was released on Independence Day, July 4th here in the United States. Give us one other insight. Anything surprise you in that conversation with President Oaks, or things that we ought to be thinking about as we look at this idea of religious liberty for people of faith and people of no faith?
Yeah, well, in this podcast, of course, President Oaks talks about the importance of the United States Constitution. But the thing that I liked most about the podcast interview was when he spoke about religious freedom not just being the right to believe, but he said it's the right to carry our beliefs into action. And he said if we can't take our personal beliefs into the public square, then we have a huge problem with society. And I really love that this, as we talk about religious liberty, we're talking about the right for people of faith or people of no faith to meet together, to have organizations that teach and advocate for religious principles, and that hope to better society.
I think that's so vital. As you were saying that, Sarah, I was thinking of something that was written about Mother Teresa. Said that words are carried by the wind, but Mother Teresa was a woman of action. And so it wasn't enough that the religious liberty extended within her own mind or in her own chapel or her own closet. It was her ability to take those into the streets of Calcutta and elevate the condition of so many individuals that were suffering in that area. And that really is, to me, the essence of it all, is that we have to be able to take our whole authentic self into the public square and be able to act on those beliefs. And that's a critical part of that conversation. Again, you can check out the Church News podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Again, this was released on July the 4th, Independence Day, the Church News podcast with Sarah Jane Weaver, and this particular episode with President Dallin H. Oaks of the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Sarah Jane Weaver, thank you for staying up late and joining us from London, England. We wish you well at the Religious Liberty Initiative there at Notre Dame. And that will be a fascinating conversation. We'll continue to follow that as well. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Boyd.
All right, and that's Sarah Jane Weaver from the Church News. Important conversations there as it relates to religious liberty. Again, whether you're a person of faith or a person of no faith, there is a space for us to have a different kind of conversation. We'll step aside for a quick break. More Inside Sources coming up next.
The race to replace.
Certifying begins.
Had both parties scrambling to get candidates on the ballot.
Republicans will be the only party with a primary.
Listen here for the nominees who made the cut and the beginning of the campaign. The race to replace. Updates mornings and afternoons this week on KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
Are you ready to go for gold? It's a chance for you to reach for gold tier checking status. So all you have to do is open an account at Hercules First Federal Credit Union and qualify for gold tier status within the first 90 days of opening the account. And our friends at Hercules will deposit $200 into your account. All you have to do is mention that you heard this on KSL News Radio, and you'll get all the benefits that come from being a first gold tier checking account owner. Ultimate ID, identity theft protection, travel benefits, cellular care coverage for accidental damage to your phone, health and wellness savings, a host of other benefits that go along with it. Our friends at Hercules First Federal Credit Union are always looking out for you in terms of what you need to have a secure financial future and confidence in what you're doing today. Check out their locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, or Salt Lake City, or as always with our friends at Hercules Credit Union. You can find them online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
Amanda, getting dinner time taken care of any time during the year is tough, but especially in the summer when everybody's schedules are totally blown up and everybody's running in different directions. That is, unless you enlist the help of Beehive Meals.
I've been using Beehive Meals now for months, and I just love it, Tim. I get 10 freezer meals delivered, and I just take one out in the morning, put it in the crock pot, and then it's warm whenever anybody's ready for dinner that night, and they're so nutritious.
It's going to save you time. It's going to save you money. The average cost of a serving is less than $3.50, and obviously your family's going to love all of the great recipes that Beehive Meals offers.
And they have macro-balanced menus, so if you want higher protein and moderate carbs, they have that. They even have gluten-free options.
They do. So you just take this freezer meal, and then you put it in the crock pot, and within hours, your family eats. Whenever they come by, it's going to be warm for them. There's a reason why they're Best of State winners 2 years in a row.
Try Beehive Meals. Go to beehivemeals.com.
Hey everybody, it's Julie coming to you from Logan, Utah's heart of the arts. We've got not one, not two, but 3 historic theaters in one block downtown. They're all bursting with live performances. Trust me, you do not want to miss out. Utah Festival Opera and Musical Theater has 300 professional artists and staff from all over the country performing their hearts out with music by a full live orchestra. You might not realize that having a full live orchestra is a big deal, but it is totally a big deal. They're doing Aida the Opera and Aida the Broadway version, the opera Lohengrin, which has only been performed 5 times in the entire United States, plus Oliver and Our Town, too. They don't call it Utah Festival for nothing. In addition to shows, there's Breakfast with the Stars, late-night cabarets, concerts, workshops, and silent movies with organ accompaniment. Oh my! Wait, just when you think it can't get better, this year only, Utah students in public and private schools get a free ticket to any or all shows they want. What? I know. Don't miss out. UtahFestival.org. UtahFestival.org.
You heard the call of spring and went to town planting your yard and garden. Everything's in, not too shabby, but you still could use a little help. After all, when you dress things up, it's the little things that zero in on the oohs and ahs, like a nice top dress. No, not the one with those expensive shoes in your closet. Top dress as in compost, bark mulch, and decorative rock for your just about beautiful yard. Oh, and by the way, with 2 to 3 inches of that covering, you help keep the weeds out, save water, and keep the plants cooler. So how do you put those finishing touches together? You call the Dirt Bag. The Dirt Bag makes dressing up your yard so much easier. They'll deliver your bag of bark, mulch, or decorative rock right to your driveway. They'll also deliver loose product in bulk. Or you can pick it up if you like just west of Mountain View Corridor at 6054 West, 9790 South in West Jordan. This is one Dirt Bag you'll love. It helps save you money and time. Order your bag now at thedirtbag.com. That's thedirtbag.com.
The UACPA supports certified professional accountants in Utah through ongoing professional education and leadership development for an ever-changing financial world. Find a CPA at uacpa.org.
Don't be worried. Be ready. KSL News Radio is partnering with Be Ready Utah to provide the plans your family needs for an emergency, the tools and supplies to keep on hand, and the knowledge on how to keep a cool head. It's Be Ready Utah. Listen for Be Ready tips and tools each Tuesday with Dave Dujanovic. Plus, find the latest preparation info at beready.utah.gov. That's beready.utah.gov. Be Ready, Utah, with KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, a 2-year-old boy drowned in a canal in Spanish Fork this morning. Police say he had wandered away from the school where his dad was coaching football. Second, a woman who used to work for an addiction treatment center has been accused of sexually assaulting some of the patients. Third, the head of the Teamsters Union says a strike by UPS workers across the country appears imminent. Right now, 87 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Inside Sources, an inside look at 2024 presidential politics.
Well, it is that time of the week where Inside Sources gives you that inside look at the presidential politics, and we'll begin where we always begin, with a very important philosophy and crucial principle to understand those who are running for president. Now, as we always say, trying to understand the behavior of someone running for president is like trying to smell the color 7. And so you can noodle on that. Don't drive into a ditch. Don't think too hard. But we've seen a lot of that coming from a lot of the campaigns, where a little bit of a head scratcher, a little bit of, wait a minute, what's going on? It's been a very busy week on the campaign trail for nearly all of the presidential candidates, from converging for Independence Day, a lot of parades and waving and kissing of babies going on there. There are also a lot of candidates working hard to just get themselves known and get a foothold in the public space and in the public's consciousness. So we want to take a couple looks at a few of the notable moments from throughout the course of the last week. One person who is very interesting and worth mentioning in this week's Inside Presidential Politics looks is Casey DeSantis, First Lady of Florida, of course, married to Governor Ron DeSantis. She recently launched a campaign called Mamas for DeSantis, encouraging all moms and grandmothers to get on board.
We are going to launch the largest mobilization of moms and grandmothers across the United States of America to protect the innocence of our children and to protect the rights of parents. We did this when the governor was going through his reelection because we saw there was a constituency of folks who really wanted a voice. And it wasn't just Republicans, it was independents, but a lot of Democrats too, who didn't like the direction that the country was going. So we launched Mamas for DeSantis. We called it a big call to action, and we had 1.1 million moms and grandmothers sign up to support the effort.
1.1 million moms and grandmoms signed on to support. That's a very interesting quick look at the influence of a spouse of a presidential candidate. Often they are in the wings. Often they do the niceties of cushy and fluffy introductions of their spouse. But there have been some that have really transcended that. And I think Casey DeSantis is one who clearly has a following, clearly has a voice, knows her way around the media, having spent most of her career there. Governor DeSantis, meanwhile, has been taking some shots across the bow and maybe some directly at the bow of his campaign ship. And his numbers have been sagging just a little bit. He told Fox News that he actually blames the media for those bad poll numbers.
I think if you look at the people like the corporate media, who are they going after? Who do they not want to be the nominee? They're going after me. Who's the president of Mexico attacking because he knows we'll be strong on the border and hold him accountable in the cartels? He's going after me. So I think if you look at all these people that are responsible for a lot of the ills in our society, they're targeting me as the person they don't want to see as the candidate.
Now, I'm just going to say from a communication standpoint, I think that was a bad move by the governor of Florida. I am a firm believer that you can make excuses or you can make progress, but you cannot make both. If his numbers are sagging, I think the governor of Florida just needs to do the hard work and heavy lifting of that hand-to-hand retail politics that you have to do in order to be successful in places like Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. So we'll continue to monitor that. Again, if it becomes a grievance message from Governor DeSantis, I think that's a losing strategy. And I don't even think his wife, Casey, and her 1.1 million moms and grandmoms can overcome that challenge. So I think he's got to shift his message, stay on the front foot. Don't try to make this a us versus them or that they're out to get you kind of moment. I don't think that's winning presidential politics. President Biden, on the other hand, was in South Carolina this week to talk about his efforts to improve the economy, Biden economics, and manufacturing.
All told, since I signed the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act and the law, companies have announced $11 billion in manufacturing and clean energy investments just in South Carolina. $11 billion. Companies across the county, or across the country, are expanding factories, building new ones, creating tens of thousands of good-paying jobs, most of which don't require a four-year degree. And when I say every job in America should be a good job, including a free and fair choice to join a union, I mean it.
Fascinating stuff there from the president. We're also keeping our eye. The president right now is speaking from the White House. He is back to a theme that has been common on the campaign trail and one that he's also done at the Rose Garden. And now inside the White House, he is talking about healthcare costs and junk fees. Those seem to be two important pillars to President Biden's Bidenomics and his strategy for taking an economic message that he's looking out for you. He's looking out for middle America. And those are two interesting areas. I'm not sure that's the winning message for the president, but he continues to beat that drum that healthcare costs and junk fees are important to the voters rolling into 2024. Now, I want to round things out with former Vice President Mike Pence, who was confronted by a voter about how he handled the 2020 Electoral College count on January the 6th. And the then Vice President, said he did exactly what his duty required that day.
But at the end of the day, I will also say to you that while I believe by God's grace that I did my duty that day, I do. No second guessing. I really think that this election has got to be about the future. If we spend the next election talking about the past, you're going to get 4 more years of Democrats in the White House. Our candidates that spent the 22 midterm elections talking about relitigating the last election lost, and they lost in places that we should have won. So I promise you, I'm going to stand on what I did. I'm going to stand on the Constitution, and any job I ever have in the future, I promise you, I'll keep my oath even when it hurts.
That was an important conversation. Again, a voter confronted the former vice president about his role on January the 6th, saying that if he would have done something different, that we wouldn't have President Biden in the White House and President Trump would have had 4 more years. The vice president was unapologetic, straightforward, and straight to the heart of the Constitution in terms of what his duty was. He also went on to say that he thought on that day the former president, Donald Trump, was wrong and that he is still wrong. And I think it's an interesting thing for him to be pointing out, to say, look, if we continue to relitigate what happened in 2020, we will lose 2024 and beyond. So I think it's an important message for the Republican side of the aisle, coming from the former vice president, talking about duty and character as a crucial part of any campaign. All right, well, that wraps up our Inside Presidential Politics on Inside Sources, and that rounds out hour number 1 of the show. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with hour number 2. We'll talk a little bit more about what's happening inside of Russia, what that all means, as well as a fascinating look at the art of Minerva Teichert, a new exhibit opening up that you don't want to miss. Stick around. More Inside Sources coming up after top-of-the-hour news.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. New details in the hit-and-run crash that killed a man on a scooter earlier this week. Police say they've arrested Robert Boyett.
This is something that we haven't stopped working on since the moment the call for service came in. Our officers, our detectives, again, our department members work tirelessly, and they don't give up.
That's Sergeant Mark Wyan with the Salt Lake City Police Department. According to charging documents, witnesses told police that Boyett knew Victor Hirschberger and was looking for him on a vengeance spree. Witnesses told police they saw Boyett flip a U-turn so he could hit Hirschberger while he was on a scooter near 10th North and 10th West on Monday. A 2-year-old boy drowned in a canal in Spanish Fork this morning. Police say the toddler wandered away from the football field at the American Leadership Academy, where his father was coaching. Searchers found the child floating face down in a canal about a quarter mile away. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Ukraine's president says their spring counteroffensive against Russia is not going as well as they'd hoped, but President Volodymyr Zelensky says they are still making progress. At the White House, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the U.S. is providing a historic amount of military aid.
We will not leave Ukraine defenseless at any point in this conflict, period.
The United States will be providing Ukraine with cluster munitions, even though many countries have banned them because of the danger they pose to civilians. Your money at this moment, near the close of trading, the Dow Jones average down 187 points, and the NASDAQ has slipped into negative territory, down 18 points right now. And our KSL weather, just going to get hot for the weekend. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
We have enough people running around Broadcast House at 4 in the morning to field a football team.
Producers, reporters, the traffic team, and us.
This is Tim and Amanda.
Join us each morning from 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Okay, it's hot outside and you need to cool. The new Air Compact appliances are up to 50% off retail. Yeah, life is about to get much cooler. At Warehouse B in Linden or at warehouseb.com, you're about to find out how much cooler. Either a new Air or Frigidaire room-size evaporative cooling fan starting at $49. Yeah, that's cool. Or the new 126-can glass door beverage fridge starting at $149. Even cooler. or a 48-quart electric camping cooler with dual zones starting at $249. That's seriously cool. With Warehouse B, everything is factory refurbished right here in Utah and comes with a 1-year warranty. Want more savings? Warehouse B is loaded with scratch and dent models that offer the kind of value your family needs today. Visit warehouseb.com and grab a countertop nugget pebble ice maker starting at $199. Shop warehouseb.com or visit their outlet store in Linden off I-15 at exit 273. Warehouse B.
Getting close to retirement? Or have you retired? You've probably got a ton of stress-filled questions on your mind. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth. Getting a second opinion with an individualized investment plan is vital, and our fiduciary advisors do just that. Take it from this Trajan Wealth client.
It was just so pleasant, so comfortable. I think we had 7 different accounts, just stuff scattered all over the place. And then so we just started, here's this, move this. And he even explained it a couple different times. But if I have more questions, he said, just give us a call. And that's what I love. He's a phone call away. Like, I'm glad I know these guys. Such a huge weight off my shoulder.
Imagine not second-guessing investments or monthly retirement income. That's the peace of mind you'll get from working with Trajan Wealth. Call 801-899-7600 today or visit TrajanWealth.com.
Actual client, no compensation, no conflicts. Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Hey, this is Chris with JCW's. Craving something sweet? We do ice cream right. Come in and try one of our shakes, freezes, or an ice cream cone, and you'll see why we say JCW's, quality, and a lot of it.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
Some good news. All lanes of traffic are now open in both directions. Bangerter Highway, about 4100 south, but that oversized load is still making its way southbound on Mountain View Corridor going from Kearns to the Oker area. Just remember, expect backups there. UDOT traffic alert, plan ahead for delays on Legacy Parkway 7 days a week through early August. The highway is down to 1 lane in each direction from I-215 to 500 south for paving. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather warming up through the weekend with a high of 100 on Sunday. It'll cool off a bit next week. Now, there's a chance of a thunderstorm today, but no precipitation in the forecast after that. And right now, 89 degrees, mostly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Do you worry about how much someone drinks?
Do you feel angry or depressed most of the time? Do you feel neglected or unloved?
Do you feel you attract people who tend to be compulsive or abusive?
Do you have money problems because of someone else's drinking?
Are you afraid or embarrassed to bring your friends home?
Do you feel that if the drinker loved you, she or he would stop drinking?
If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are not alone.
More than half of all adults have a family history of alcoholism.
Not everyone trapped by alcohol is an alcoholic.
Families and friends are suffering too. Al-Anon and Alateen can help. Call 1-866-200-0223 or visit alanon.org/help.
Social Security is with you through life's journey from birth to retirement. As your life changes year to year, so do your needs. For over 80 years, Social Security has helped to meet your needs and is committed to improving access to the services that make a difference in your life. Today, you can verify your earnings, estimate your future benefits, apply for retirement, manage your benefits, and even change your address, all from the comfort of your home. Social Security's online services help put you in control with secure access to your information anytime, anywhere, allowing you to spend more time with family, friends, or simply just enjoying the day. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. See what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Regarding Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's in St. Petersburg.
Where is he this morning? He might have left for Moscow or for somewhere else, but he's not on Belarusian territory.
Well, yesterday we learned that Wagner chief Prigozhin may be back in Russia. He may be in St. Petersburg. He may be on his way to the Kremlin. He'd been exiled to Belarus after leading an armed mutiny in this, leading towards the streets of Moscow, stopping about 124 miles short. Then a pro-Kremlin newspaper leaked images of a raid of Prigozhin's mansion where they found wigs, passports, gold, and more. So what's going on? What story's being told? Why would Prigozhin go back to Russia? And what's been the fallout of this rebellion? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, as we look at all of the fallout of what's been going on inside of Russia, again, we want to get underneath the headlines of all of those things, and really thrilled to have joining us on the program Brian Whitmore, an associate professor of practice at the University of Texas Arlington and a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center in Washington, D.C. He's also the founder and host of the Power Vertical podcast. That's a podcast that focuses on Russian and post-Soviet affairs. And Brian, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Boyd.
So let's dive into this a little bit in terms of what's actually going on as it relates to Mr. Prigozhin. Is he in Russia? Is he on his way to Moscow? It seems like there's a vilification campaign ramping up from inside the Kremlin. What are you hearing?
Yeah, there's a lot of data points to unpack right now, Boyd. The first thing I would say is when we step back and look at what's just happened in Russia and what's transpired over the last couple of weeks, we basically have one group of Russians killing another group of Russians because they disagree about how to kill Ukrainians, right? When you really strip this thing, that's what you have. And you have to ask the question, what does that say about the state of modern Russia at this time? But what we had in Russia was a systemic breakdown a couple of weeks. The Russian system, unlike ours, the Russian system is based not on institutions like ours, but on patronage networks, on clan rivalries, right? Most authoritarian systems operate this way. And Putin's role in this system was to balance these clans and these networks. And that was the source of his power. He was the one figure that everybody trusted to balance all these clans and all these networks. His inability to do so in this case has thrown the system into chaos.
Yeah.
And when I look at kind of Russian politics, I think of it like a crime syndicate. I think it operates like a crime syndicate. And Putin is the godfather. Prigozhin's an underboss. The Secretary of Defense, the Minister of Defense, Sergei Shoigu, is an underboss. So you basically had two underbosses fighting, and the godfather could not balance that. And now the system is breaking down. And all of the previous assumptions we had about how Russian politics work are inoperable for the moment. We're really in uncharted territory. What Prigozhin returning to Russia suggests to me is that the deal that was worked out 2 weeks ago that may or may not have been brokered by the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, is clearly not in effect anymore. Prigozhin certainly feels that it's safe for him to come back to St. Petersburg. Now, why is that the case? Because when this first happened, again, I look at this from the perspective of a crime syndicate. I didn't expect Prigozhin to be long for this world.
Right.
You come at the king, you best not miss, right? To quote from one of my favorite TV shows, right? So that's kind of my top line of what we're seeing now. But we're seeing this whole system, this clan system, break down, and at this point, all bets are off.
Yeah, and I think that's such a fascinating perspective that you bring to this, Brian, that it is less about the institutions and more about those relationships within that network, really like a crime family, and that undermining of that balance between those two underbosses, as you described them, really has shown a light on maybe Vladimir Putin's inability to maintain a strong grip on power. So how do you see this playing out rolling forward? What comes next? What's the next shoe to drop? How does Vladimir Putin try to navigate this now that it's begun to unravel?
Well, what Putin needs to do right now is to reestablish this balance and reconsolidate the elite and reestablish control. And he has two ways of doing that. One way of doing that is to basically purge the elite, to reintroduce fear into the system. Prigozhin clearly did not have fear in what he just did. You don't take an army and march on Moscow if you're afraid. Right. So there's one theory out there is that Putin really needs to crack down. He really needs to have a purge. He really needs to go all Stalin on his elite, if you will. But there are those of us that are watching Russia are wondering if the system is strong enough to withstand the shock that such a purge would create. Right. So that creates a problem for Putin. Does he risk really breaking the whole system? Because I always looked at the system as being very, very brittle. It looks solid as a rock until the moment it isn't. And right now we're really seeing the cracks in it. So Putin's in a tough spot. Now he's trying to buy off the elite. He's increased the salaries of the military, the police, and the security services by over 10%. So he's trying to buy off the elite. He has this National Guard, this Rosgvardia, which is nothing like our National Guard. It's basically a Praetorian Guard that reports to Putin and is run by his uber-loyal former bodyguard, Viktor Zolotov. He's given them heavy munitions. So he's clearly trying to – but it is not the decisive Putin we've become accustomed to.
Right.
Now, that said, Putin's famously vindictive. He takes his time. And we may see, Yevgeny Prigozhin have what the Russians call a неприятный случайность, or an unpleasant accident going forward. If I were him, I would stay away from windows in tall buildings.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be drinking any tea, right? But so this is still playing out. This is very, very fluid right now. I just recorded a podcast with three other Russia experts on this, and we're all looking at concluding the main thing is we really don't know right now. We don't have a lot of visibility into what's actually happening. Yeah. So we can look at the data points popping out, on the top of it. It's like Churchill's old metaphor of Russia of bulldogs fighting under a carpet. You see the carpet moving around, but you don't really know what's going on underneath.
Yeah. Great perspective. Brian Whitmore, and you want to check out his podcast, the Power Vertical Podcast. Again, focuses on Russian and post-Soviet affairs. Brian, we're going to have you back as we continue to see those bulldogs wrestling underneath the carpet. And to me, it always comes back to this idea of it's not who storms the castle, or in this case, the Kremlin. It's who defends it. And the silence there, I think, is going to be an interesting thing to watch. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to having you back soon.
Great. Thanks for having me, boys.
Again, that's Brian Whitmore, the Power Vertical Podcast. And again, the Bulldogs may be wrestling underneath the rug there in Russia. We'll find out what happens if Vladimir Putin is able to maintain power. Again, as he keeps that structure in place, it's more about networks and clans than it is about institutions of government. Watching how that plays out is going to be fascinating for all of us to watch. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. The race to replace.
Certifying begins.
Had both parties scrambling to get candidates on the ballot.
Republicans will be the only party with a primary.
Listen here for the nominees who made the cut and the beginning of the campaign. The race to replace. Updates mornings and afternoons this week on KSL News Radio. Your all-day companion for news.
I guess it's human nature, Amanda, that no matter how much money we have in our savings account, it never seems like it's enough. And if you find yourself in that mode right now, let us direct you over to our friends at UCCU. They are wanting to help you supercharge your savings.
UCCU is offering high-rate savings options with yields up to 5.5%. All you do is go to UCCU.com and select a high-rate savings option to do just what you said, supercharge your savings.
You're going to get a much bigger return on your savings right now. It's a savings certificate, which means you make one deposit up front and your money grows over a fixed period of time. So you can have that grow over 5 years, but UCCU has created some very short-term savings certificates with high yields, short like 6 months, 9 months, or a year.
So you decide how long do you want to put that money. You deposit money, a one-time only deposit, and then you let it stay in. The longer it stays in there, the higher the interest rate you earn.
And if you need immediate access to your money, UCCU's Money Market will give you a high yield and anytime access.
UCCU, you're going to love where you bank.
Do you know why more homeowners choose Any Hour Services for help when it's time to replace their air conditioners? What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and the main reasons people choose Any Hour Services is because of our people, processes, and convenience. People tell us all the time that there's just something different about having an Any Hour Services technician in their home. That's why most of our over 18,000 Google reviews mention our technicians by name. Another reason is our 7-step install process that we call the Any Hour Difference. It all starts with the needs analysis, where you explain what you like and dislike about your current system. This helps us design and size a system that fits your comfort and efficiency preferences as well as your home's airflow requirements. As for convenience, most of our installs are completed in one day. We also have flexible, no-money-down financing options available, even if you've been told no in the past. So if you've been thinking about getting a new air conditioner, call Any Hour Services and schedule a free estimate today. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
They say good things come to those who wait, but we both know the truth. If you want the good things in life, you've got to go out and get them. So if you've been dreaming of a Cadillac, don't wait. Head to Jerry Seiner Cadillac and get one for yourself. With their award-winning XT4, 5, and 6 models available on-site and the area's top selection of certified pre-owned Cadillacs, there's no need to wait to drive in luxury. Stop dreaming, start driving. Visit Jerry Seiner and experience the Seiner difference.
Maximize your energy savings with a new energy-efficient heating and cooling system from Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric today. Get up to $1,750 back and a free Nest thermostat when Yes buys back your old inefficient HVAC system. Expert technicians, guaranteed service, and flexible payment options are great reasons to call Yes today. The same people you know and trust, providing Utah with the same great service you've counted on for more than 45 years. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, the art of Minerva Teichert has been filled for decades with lessons on pioneering, the American West, the faith of the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. A new exhibit at the Church History Museum features the art and pioneering principles of Minerva Teichert. We're really thrilled to have joining us in studio today Laura Paulson Howe, who is the art curator of this new exhibit at the Church History Museum. And the title I love as well, With This Covenant in My Heart, the Art and Faith of Minerva Teichert. And Laura, welcome to the show.
Oh, so thrilled to be here.
We could spend the next several hours. I am a big fan of Minerva Teichert's art because it's so big, it's so bold. She's such an incredible storyteller. But I want to kind of start with the beginning of what I think is the essence of Minerva Teichert, and that is that she has to be the epitome of bloom where you're planted. Give us some of her history in that sense.
That's a great way to describe her. So she comes from small town, American Falls, Idaho. She'll end up in Cokeville, Wyoming. And though she goes out of these areas to train in Chicago and in New York, she comes back. And here in a place where she doesn't have access to a lot of resources, she makes things happen.
Yeah.
And so she'll use a lot of her 10-foot living room studio to create giant paintings. She mixes her own paints. When she has nice art materials to work on, she uses them, but when she doesn't, she paints on wood scraps. And so she just uses everything available to her to create beautiful, magnificent stories.
Yeah, I love the fact that a lot of her art is just the shape of her living room wall.
Yes, exactly. It's what she had to fit. Sometimes she folded it if it was too big so that she could make a bigger painting, but most of the time she maximized the space that she had.
Yeah, give us a little of the backstory of the title of the exhibit. With This Covenant in My Heart, it actually came out of a period not dissimilar from where we are today, coming out of a pandemic.
That's right. She had just come home from art school in New York. She had married her husband, Herman. And she, in the 1918 flu pandemic, comes through where she's living in Idaho. And so she feels very, very sick. She comments that when she felt just near death, she thought of all her art training and what a waste that it would be. So she says she prayed to God. She says, if you'll give me some work to do, I'd gladly do it. And then comments, with this covenant in my heart, I began to live. So we thought this was a beautiful metaphor for our exhibition, that whatever Minerva Teichert was doing, whether she was feeding chickens or churning butter or reading scriptures to her children or painting, she was doing it in devotion to God.
Yeah, I was talking with our colleague Carol Makita earlier today, and she's been over to the exhibit, done a great story for our KSL TV News. Also, we'll have a piece on Sunday edition coming up in a couple of weeks. And we talked about the fact that she took this passion and incorporated it just into her daily life. You mentioned chickens and butter and children and all of that, and she just made this an extension. She did it when she could and made it all happen.
She did. When people stopped by to visit, all of a sudden they were modeling for a painting. And so every part of her life involved that faith in God.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about her influence and her depiction of the American West. I think some of those scenes that she has painted they're just heroic, and to me they capture the essence of the American West.
Definitely. It was a time, 1930s and 1940s into the 1950s. Scenes of the American West were very, very collectible, very, very popular. And so it was perfect fit for her style. So she paints these beautiful, epic scenes of both white settlers coming into the Intermountain West, also indigenous peoples. And she makes them romantic and epic. One review of one of her paintings said it looked like these pioneers were walking up the canyon in their Sunday best. And so I think the emotion she tries to capture is very theatrical and makes you feel this grand story of American society.
Yeah, and she has had such an influence both on that aspect, also in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was stunned at how many paintings and murals you're showcasing in this exhibit, many that I'd never seen before. Give us some backstory in terms of how this all came together.
Sure. Well, one, we're very grateful to a number of private lenders who have very graciously lended some paintings that, yes, many people haven't seen before. As you're putting together a show, we wanted to honor the legacy of Minerva Teichert, and so it becomes just a game of find who has paintings a little bit, and we're so grateful that we were able to pull together the show we have here. 45 original paintings, and that covers a gallery, three galleries together. She didn't paint small.
No,
she painted big.
That living room wall had its place, and
that's right.
Size was part of it. So important. One of the other things I wanted to get to and ask you about, Laura, is women are featured predominantly in many of her paintings in powerful ways, in subtle ways, but in very purposeful ways.
She does. I mean, she's a woman herself. I think she's a great testament why we need lots of different kinds of people creating, because everyone brings their own perspective to art. Yeah. So she definitely highlighted women in all of her portrayals. As she illustrated the Book of Mormon, and every story that mentions a woman in the Book of Mormon, it's in her illustrations. She used a red paisley shawl very often. It was an object that she owned. She had neighbors who had paisley shawls, and so she often wrapped her women in that red paisley, and so it draws your attention right to those women. So we have women settling the West. We have women acting in strength and in faith. Almost all of her paintings feature women in really important and powerful ways.
So amazing. So as the curator of this exhibit, one, that's got to be no pressure, right?
Sure.
But as you went through that process, what did you learn about Minerva Teichert, or what surprised you as you began to pull all of this together?
Oh, that's a great way to say it. I think I was surprised. One thing she left behind that is a huge advantage to curators, but to anyone who would like to know more about her history, is just this voluminous record, a written record of letters. And so as I read through her letters, I was so impressed that no matter what she was doing, she put it in the context of faith. One letter she writes to her daughter in December. It's the middle of December. Life is crazy in December. Yeah. She talks about all the presents she has to give, all the presents she has to wrap. And says at the end, everyone here is busier than you can imagine. Lord must be coming soon. Oh. And just kind of that practical. So now in December, when I'm wrapping presents, I'm thinking, oh, so busy. Lord is coming soon.
Got to be coming soon.
Yeah. Oh. And that was true all of her life. That faith just was woven into the everyday qualities of her life. That's something new that I learned that I was really inspired by.
Now, something you've done as part of this exhibit that I think is a master stroke of all master strokes, you've made this so interactive and so accessible. You don't have to be an art connoisseur or expert in any way, but you've also made it accessible to children with some really unique things. Tell us about that.
Well, I think this message of faith in Jesus Christ, women are important. These are all things that kids need to know. And so we've tried to think of how to be accessible. One thing that we have is a number of activity cards that you can walk through the exhibition and pick up. One, you'll walk home with a beautiful print of a number of her paintings, but also there'll be things to do that help kids really get inside the works. We also have drawing activities. Minerva Teichert taught her grandkids how to draw on brown pieces of paper, and so we have activities for kids to learn how to draw a cow, learn how to draw a chicken, just as Minerva taught. A number of really fun, we have her brass bucket on display and a red paisley shawl. You can find these in so many paintings of hers, and so it becomes a hide-and-seek activity inside the exhibition. So we really encourage families to come, and I think they'll enjoy.
Yeah, give us the breakdown when people can come and actually take part in this exhibit.
Fantastic. It opened yesterday.
Yay.
And so it's open. You can come right now. The museum opens at 10 o'clock, open until 6, most days of the week. 8 to 8 o'clock on other days, and you can find that information on our website. And it will be up for 13 months, so through August of next year, 2024.
Wonderful. And I think as people go through this, I think one of the other things that we've been trying to get people to connect the dots a little bit. We live in such a specialized society that we often miss some of these other things. And Minerva Teichert had an interesting beginning. She had a little talent, a little inclination. Her parents fostered a little bit, and then she took it. But then she didn't limit just to art because her reach was so much greater than that.
Sure. I mean, she lived a richly layered life, and all the things she did, both the hugely visible things and the invisible things, were all very important. She also, we have evidence she composed music, she wrote plays, creative production was very much an important part of her life.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We've been talking about the fact that we don't have very many Da Vincis anymore. The people who can connect the dots. We get so narrowly niched in a passion or a profession. Our kids are becoming specialized by the time they're 8. To be a pianist or a little league second baseman or whatever it may be. And I think Minerva Teichert was another one who just showed, look, you can pursue your passion, and you can be well-rounded, and you can have influence in all kinds of places.
I think she did. She certainly, all the decisions she made very consciously and didn't look back. And so I think I'm so grateful for the choices she made to live this full life, to help. She and her husband ran a ranch as partners. They raised 5 children. And I think all of that life is evident in her works, becomes the style that we love of Minerva Teichert so much. I think she uniquely qualified herself, and that made her of service in important ways.
Yeah, that's what making a difference looks like. That's what it acts like. Laura Paulson Howe is the curator of the new exhibit at the Church History Museum. It's called With This Covenant in My Heart, The Art and Faith of Minerva Teichert. And it's important. You should go check this out. Regardless of where you are or what you're doing, put this on your schedule. Schedule some time to just go through at a leisurely pace, and you will be richly blessed, and you will think of new things to be curious about, new things to pursue, and see what one individual in a remote place in Wyoming can do to change the world. Laurel, thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you.
All right, we'll step aside for bottom of the hour news. More Inside Sources coming up next. Stick around.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top local story this hour. Rocky Mountain Power's had a major breakthrough in being able to predict where wildfires might pop up. The company's using special technology that combs through 30 years of hourly weather forecasts, compares that with present-day numbers, and creates a risk factor for power outages and wildfires all over the state.
It looks back at those 30 years and says, hey, this is the second strongest wind gust that has ever been forecast for this location in the last 30 years. And this is what that means in terms of your potential for outages. This is what it means for your wildfire danger.
Rocky Mountain Power Meteorology Manager Stephen Vandenberg tells KSL TV they're hoping it helps us get a step ahead of whatever Mother Nature may want to throw at us. Salt Lake City police moved in on a suspect in a hit-and-run homicide earlier this week with help from the Unified Police. They arrested 53-year-old Robert Boyd at a campsite near Grantsville. He's accused of running down Victor Hirschberger early Monday morning near 10th North and 10th West. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. Former President Trump on the campaign trail today in Council Bluffs, Iowa, at an event for farmers. Ahead of that event, the Trump campaign said the former president would specifically call out Republican rival Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for opposing a federal subsidy for ethanol.
Today I want to talk about how we're going to fight, and I think no president has ever come close to me for farmers, for fighting for farmers and farmers' rights.
Iowa holds the first presidential caucuses in the nation. At the close of trading today, the Dow Jones average was down 187 points. The NASDAQ also slipped from positive into negative territory, ending the day down 18 points. The S&P 500 was down 12. And our KSL weather, it'll get hot before the weekend's done. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon.
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
On KSL News Radio.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group.
financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Are you or someone you take care of as their caregiver living with Alzheimer's disease? This study just might be for you. Consider participating in Athira's clinical trial exploring a novel repair and regenerative approach to Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City is looking for people with mild to moderate dementia, 55 to 85 years old. A consistent caregiver or support person is necessary for the conduct of this study. This study is a late-stage clinical study of an investigational drug for the treatment of mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. Pantheon Clinical Research has over 30 years' experience with clinical trials. They conduct their business with professionalism, efficiency, and integrity. Contact Pantheon Clinical Research in Salt Lake City today. Again, call Pantheon Clinical Research today at 385-281-0550. That's 385-281-0550. Or go to pantheonclinical.com. That's pantheonclinical.com.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's high-yield savings certificates. Here's Ricky Meese.
We have crews in the final cleanup stages of an accident on southbound I-15. It's after 6 North as you're approaching the I-80 junction. It had been blocking a left lane of traffic. It looks like that's now open. Fill up your bucket list in Box Elder County. History, recreation, and wildlife, along with excellent dining and shopping, await you. Find out more at visitboxeldercounty.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather warming up through the weekend with a high of 100 on Sunday. It cools off a bit next week. There is a chance of a thunderstorm today, but no precipitation in the forecast after that. And right now, 91 degrees and partly cloudy at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Over the last year, we've seen Russia go through a significant brain drain with talented people leaving the country in droves. But Russia's not the only U.S. rival suffering from the loss of talent. So we want to take a look at China. What's happening in terms of brain drain as it relates to China? What does that mean for the country? What does it mean for us here in the United States? And we're really pleased to have back on the program once again with us Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist at the Washington Post and an economic and political commentator for CNN. And Catherine, welcome back to the show.
Great to join you.
You had a great piece in the Washington Post talking about how America can exploit China's brain drain. Give us a little sense of where we've been coming out of the pandemic and what that actually looks like in terms of people leaving China.
Sure. So basically for the last several decades, every year, China has lost population on net due to migration, meaning that more people are leaving the country than are moving to the country. However, there was a period for a few years, basically after the financial crisis, when China was doing, relatively speaking, much better than a lot of the, wealthier countries that Chinese nationals had been emigrating to. So I'm thinking the United States and Europe and other places. And you saw fewer people leave during those years. But now, post-pandemic, and actually in the couple of years pre-pandemic, you have seen Chinese nationals become much more footloose, looking for ways to seek their fortune or invest their fortune abroad, including in the United States, but also lots of other countries like Singapore, for example. And now that the pandemic lockdowns, that, you know, as you may recall, China had this kind of draconian zero COVID policy. Now that those are over, you are seeing lots more people pick up and move. So in 2022, the estimate was about 300,000 people on net left the country, and roughly the same number this year are expected to leave the country, and that's about double the level that we saw in those several years following the financial crisis, when it looked like maybe more people were staying put.
Yeah, one of the things that you noted in your piece, Catherine, I thought was really interesting, was that just a number of Chinese millionaires, those who are doing well, are also leaving the country.
Yes. And I think we don't know, you know, what the exact motivations are for why people leave. But you can imagine that people have gotten a little bit more nervous, potentially, about the mysterious disappearances of several high-profile billionaires, as well as well-known business people in the country. They've sort of just been disappeared without much explanation, or at least without much credible explanation. So perhaps if you are an upwardly mobile Chinese person, that has you a bit anxious. There are other reasons why people may not want to stay, including that youth unemployment is actually relatively high. Of course, living in an authoritarian country, whatever its economic advantages at times, and, you know, China has had very rapid growth over the past couple of decades, whatever those may be, are relatively arbitrary limits on freedom of ideas, freedom of capital, freedom of movement, obviously are not necessarily conducive to thriving for many people. So I think that there's probably a complex group of motivations that are leading people to leave, but they appear to be disproportionately higher skilled, younger, and deeper pocketed, shall we say. People who want to hold on, you know, either see other opportunities abroad or have already made a lot of money and want to take it abroad because maybe the regulatory environment or otherwise doesn't feel as safe in China.
Yeah, exactly. We call that suboptimal in terms of upward mobility.
Yeah.
Before we get to what the U.S. can do and how the U.S. can benefit from some of this as well, I do want to hit one other point from your piece, and that is the drag that this is having on China as you look at both the decrease in the fertility rates and the out-migration. Give us a sense of what that's doing internally. What are the dynamics inside of China?
That's definitely not good for GDP growth, for standards of living, and this is obviously not unique to China. Lots of other countries have had declining fertility rates, including the United States, including Europe, Japan. Lots of countries have dealt with that. And the aging of the population that stays behind also presents a challenge. So when you have a growing share of the population that's moving into retirement age and a shrinking share of the population that's still working, that's still paying into the system that supports those who are retired, that is a fiscal challenge. That's an economic challenge for, again, lots of countries, but especially China, because for China, for many years, the source of its growth was its just massive workforce, right? And so if you have some share of that workforce, but perhaps disproportionately the most high-skilled and productive share of that workforce dropping out or at least eyeing the exits, that is going to be a major drag on economic growth in the years ahead. Again, not unique to China, but certainly something that China has to worry about.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of these very talented folks moving to other places, whether that's to Germany or whether that's to Singapore. Of course, there's a U.S. component to that as well. We know some in Congress have been trying to make it harder for Chinese citizens to come here to the United States. What should we be looking at from a policy standpoint? Where are the opportunities for the United States as we look at this coming out of China?
Immigration has long been one of the United States' great superpowers. The fact that global talent wants to come to the United States and contribute here, sees opportunities here that they lack abroad, and that they have the motivation, the brain power, the work ethic, et cetera, to come here and contribute. We have seen waves of scientists, for example, entrepreneurs, for whatever reason, departing conditions in their homelands over time and coming to the United States and contributing here and also making those who were already here more productive. And many of those, by the way, waves of people who have come from countries that we have considered adversaries. So, for example, in the early/mid 20th century, the United States took in a lot of German scientists who contributed heavily to U.S. scientific development, military development. Much of our space program was enhanced by the fact that we brought in people who were from Germany, both people who worked for the Nazis and who were persecuted by the Nazis, one of those groups being a little bit more controversial than the other. You had a lot of Soviet talent being drawn into the United States, not just scientists, but artists, ballerinas, entrepreneurs, others who, wanted to escape the economic and political and civil rights constraints that they dealt with in their home countries, came to the United States, and with those groups of people, just like many Chinese people whom Americans are skeptical of now, there were concerns about national security, about spying, et cetera. We did vetting then, and presumably we can do more exhaustive vetting now. But the point of all of this is that we have, as a country, massively benefited economically, technologically, from the fact that we are a global magnet for talent, and we've also benefited diplomatically, geopolitically, in the sense that it's great propaganda, it's great pro-Western, pro-U.S. marketing to say, look, we are the destination of choice for Russian scientists, for Chinese scientists, for all of these entrepreneurs around the world who want to come and contribute here. That's great marketing for us, besides the fact, of course, that we get to, take advantage of that talent here, and the fact that that talent is no longer available to whoever these geopolitical rivals may be, whether they're China or Russia or any other country that we believe we are competing with. So I think there are a lot of opportunities in general to take advantage of this superpower that, again, has long benefited the United States, particularly in the case of China, since we see ourselves as competing with China on a lot of high-tech sector fronts. The United States is investing heavily right now in these industrial policies to build semiconductor plants, battery plants, lots of other high-tech industrial policy. We don't have the talent right now to get those things executed. We have the money, but we don't have the engineers and the high-skilled construction workers, among others, to do it. So, again, all opportunities for us. Unfortunately, I fear we are not taking advantage of them, and in fact, in many dimensions, working hard to drive that talent away.
I'm gonna put you in charge of both marketing strategy for immigration and have you be the chief lobbyist for getting Congress to realize these are people that we want. This is part of who we are as a nation, and this is a unique moment. And as you've laid it out, both in your piece and your brilliant commentary. That look, this is a part of who we are, and if we want to really compete, if we want to deal with semiconductors or battery manufacturing or space or whatever it is, there is a stream of talent that not only will we benefit from, it also is not good for those that are our adversaries in creating the process. I think you quoted our friend from Cato, Scott Lincecum, that you can be a China hawk or you can be an immigration hawk, but you can't really be both. I think you've laid out that case that we've got to look at this just a little bit different.
Yes, and Scott has been great on this issue. He's been writing about it. I've been writing about it. I wrote last year a similar piece basically saying, let's drain Putin's brain.
Yeah.
That there was an opportunity then. There were a lot of high-skilled Russian tech professionals, among others, who were really trying to leave the country, and many of whom were leaving the country and were going to other parts of Eastern Europe, for example, or Central Asia. And I really thought we should have been doing more to recruit them to the United States. We're taking in a lot of Ukrainians, obviously. And I still very much believe we should do our best to provide a safe haven to those people, whatever their skill levels.
Yeah.
But in terms of taking advantage of the brain drain from Russia, that, there's more we could be doing there. There's more we could be doing on the China front. And I just hope we can get out of our own way, that this sort of xenophobia that has both driven away people from these kinds of opportunities, and that has made Americans more skeptical of these opportunities. We can get over it. We can think through the national security constraints here, and find ways to exploit this vulnerability in some of our geopolitical rivals right now.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Catherine, that this is another one of those fake fights and false choices. We can do this. We can do it different. We can have all the security pieces. We can do the things that we need to. And that's a compatible principle with both being welcoming to immigrants and also being strategic in terms of our entrepreneurs, our science, and all those other opportunities as well. Catherine, this is a brilliant piece in the Washington Post. We always appreciate your perspective and your commentary on CNN as well. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's Catherine Rampell, opinion columnist at the Washington Post, economic and political commentator for CNN. Some great insight there. Look, we can take advantage of very talented people who want to come to this country, and we can do it right. All those things are compatible. We just have to get Congress to look at it just a little bit different. We'll be right back.
The first half of 2023 was nonstop.
The rain and snow keeps falling. Crews are working on Immigration Creek.
Lori Vallow Daybell.
Guilty on all 6 charges.
Congressman Chris Stewart to step down.
Join us for what comes next. Get breaking news from Tim and Amanda mornings 5 to 9. Go deeper with David Dujanovic at 9 and Boyd Matheson at 1. And drive home with Jeff Kaplan from 3 to 7. The news won't slow, and neither will we at KSL News Radio.
Angie's List is now Angie, and we've heard a lot of theories about why.
I thought it was an eco move. Fewer words, less paper.
No, it was so you could say it faster.
No, it's to be more iconic.
Must be a tech thing. But those aren't quite right. It's because now you can compare upfront prices, book a service instantly, and even get your project handled from start to finish.
Sounds easy.
It is, and it makes us so much more than just a list. Get started at Angie.com. That's ANGI, or download the app today.
Solving mysteries is hard. Streaming them isn't. We need to know what happened.
There's someone else pulling the strings here.
This month, get in touch with your inner detective and stream the best selection of British mysteries during Mystery Month on BritBox.
That is interesting.
Watch entire series of fan favourites, including the newest seasons of Luther, Silent Witness, Father Brown, Vera, and more.
My lips are sealed.
No one does mystery like the Brits. Start streaming now with a free trial at BritBox.com.
With the economy the way it is, you're probably staying put. So invest in your home, your number one asset, with beautiful custom replacement windows from Advanced Window Products. They're a local Utah company building beautiful vinyl framed and insulated double pane windows for 37 years right here in Salt Lake City. Advanced Window Products will save you money on your energy bill. Get security features to keep your family safe. And at Advanced Window Products, it's all custom. And the best part? They're local. They build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. So there's no middleman markup. You save on the highest quality windows in Utah. Plus, Rocky Mountain and Dominion offer rebates. For a limited time, they offer 60-month 0% financing. And right now, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more. They're working 8 weeks out. So make the call now. Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
If you're hiring, it can feel like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. Like Marco, president of operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. Now try ZipRecruiter free at ZipRecruiter.com/free. ZipRecruiter.com/FREE.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Rocky Mountain Power thinks it has a better system for predicting wildfires by looking back at 30 years worth of data. Second, police arrested a man suspected of running down another man in the middle of the street in Rose Park. Third, former President Trump campaigning in Iowa, trying to persuade voters that his policies are better for farmers than Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Right now, 91 degrees, partly cloudy in Salt Lake City. Back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It is great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we round out the program today and as we round out the week, it is something you may not have known today. Did you know that today is Global Forgiveness Day? A very important event. It's celebrated on the 7th of July every year. And forgiveness is an interesting thing and a difficult thing for many of us. So Global Forgiveness Day is a good opportunity, a good reminder that forgiving people is essential, and not just for the other person. It's actually better for your mental health, for your own soul, for your own peace. It is an important thing to actually do, and you've heard me say it on this show before that when it comes to that, we've developed in our society this forced effect about being angry or becoming bitter or holding a grudge, not forgiving. And it's true that even the fiercest wind, the most violent storm, it eventually subsides. And stillness comes. There's a moment of calm. It comes. And it can't be sustained forever. And sometimes in those storms of our relationships or our interactions or our arguments with others, we think that we can sustain it forever, that we can just hold that grudge, that we can keep being angry and upset. We can get our blood pressure boiling and up. We can do an angry rant on our social media feeds. But none of that's normal. It's against the laws of nature that a storm stay forever. It just doesn't. It doesn't anywhere in the world. Storms come, storms go. And so, yes, we have rocky moments in our relationships. Yes, we have problems occur in business. Yes, we have people who don't live up to their promises. Yes, we have people who do things that are hurtful or harmful. And yet, we have to move past that. I really believe that most humans are not angry by nature. We do get angry, we protest, we voice opposition, and then we move on. But this forced anger, this unwillingness to forgive or to move on, is not sustainable. But often what comes is contempt. And our modern social media makes it all the easier to just keep that rolling along. You've heard me on this show before that sometimes we allow, on a personal level, we just keep it going. We let it fester, or we keep rehashing it with whoever will listen to us about how awful that other person was, or can you believe so-and-so said this, or that this person did that. And we keep it going. In his novel, The Light Between Oceans, M.L. Stedman captured, I think, the essence of all of this. A conversation between a man who had been abused and mistreated by the people of a tiny town and his wife. And his wife just simply could not understand his warm-hearted forgiveness and his absolute rejection of any feelings of contempt towards the people of the town. And so listen to this dialogue. So when his wife asked him how he could possibly show such forgiveness, the husband replies, "I choose to." That's an important thing. I choose to forgive. I can leave myself to rot in the past, spend my time hating people for what happened, or I can forgive. That's some pretty good advice. His wife responds and says, "But it's not that easy." And I don't think she's wrong. Forgiving is not an easy thing to do. Sometimes it's easier to hold on to a grudge or some hurt or some harm. But the man smiles back and he says, "It's not easy, but it is so much less exhausting." And then this important statement: you only have to forgive once. To resent, you have to do it all day, every day. You have to keep remembering all the bad things. And I have seen people who are simply unwilling to forgive. It may have been something that happened in a 5th grade classroom. It may be something that happened when they were in college, or something that happened with a friend or a neighbor. And they harbor it. They hold on to it. They keep remembering all the bad things all day, every day. And that's how you develop contempt. That's how you become bitter. And so as we look at this World Forgiveness Day, it's a great chance for all of us to just practice that a little bit. Now, make no mistake, this does not mean you are a doormat. This does not make you a pushover. This does not mean you stay in abusive relationships. None of the above. But the important thing is that you have that ability to forgive and to move on, because it's so much less exhausting. You only have to forgive once. To resent or to have contempt, you have to do it all day, every day. You have to recreate those negative base emotions over and over and over again. Interesting, on this World Forgiveness Day, Russell M. Nelson, president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, took to his social media page to talk about forgiveness. He said forgiveness is not just a one-time act, but a continuous process that requires patience, compassion, and understanding. It is not always easy to forgive those who have hurt you, but you can receive strength from Jesus Christ. President Nelson concluded saying, "Today is World Forgiveness Day. I invite you to remember the principle of 70 times 7 and extend forgiveness to someone who has wronged you." I think that's an important thing. If we all did that today, if we all just took one person who has wronged us and forgave them, I think the world would be a different place tomorrow. And so that's a chance for all of us to actually practice it just a little bit, to become better. Not to become bitter. And so again, remember, on this World Forgiveness Day, you only have to forgive once. To resent or have contempt, you have to do it all day, every day. And you have to live in the past of that anger and bitterness. So give it a shot. Let me know how it works out for you. That wraps it up for us here on Inside Sources on KSL News Radio. I'm Boyd Matheson.